This is Big Man Tyrone, and you're about to watch the MtG Cabal cast with your hosts, Woad, Thirsty, and Reptar. Sub to us on all your podcast networks at MtG Cabal Cast and YouTube.
All right, guys, welcome to the newest episode of the Cabal cast. We're coming to you this week. There was a bit of some drama, maybe news that came out of GP Minneapolis this week, resulting in attendance. Some pros came out and said some stuff about that, and I know it's something that we've discussed before, but based on who was involved and what exactly has changed in the Magic landscape just over like the past couple months, we basically wanted to discuss what low attendance at non-invite events means financially, and then what that fallout will look like or could look like, and basically just give some tips on how to prepare for that, and then we'll take it away into picks. Yep. So the sky is falling, the game is dying, whatever. Reptar, you have a differing opinion.
Yeah, so going into round 3, I think I tweeted out the final attendance number looked like it was 944, maybe 955 with a bye. I didn't check for a table 0 in in pairings, right? And we do have some people with 3 buys, but round 4 is going to see decreased attendance because people are going to drop after going 0-2 or 0-3, right? The dream is dead.
Yeah.
And the Minneapolis Convention Center, I think we were in room C, and it is gigantic. The 944-person GP was only about a third of the room. But what happened was on Saturday, that the rest of the room filled in. We did not see that at DC, and we did not see that at Detroit. Both of those places we saw a room that was maybe half full if you combined everybody there. At this Magic Fest, what I actually saw was the entire room was filled in. So we are seeing possibly the advent of the Magic Fest dream kind of come true. I know there were some cosplayers there. I didn't see them, though they were only a booth away, according to photos. And the local booth for this event, I believe, was Weird Cards. They are the progenitors of Oathbreaker, and they were there slinging all weekend. And they looked fairly busy. They had some product and some stuff from WotC to supplement. And the gentleman that came in with a pallet of 8.5 tail figurines sold one to Weird Cards. Oh, if you've never seen it, the statue looks beautiful.
Oh, yeah, the statue is gorgeous. Where did you find a pallet of them? Random guy in Minneapolis, but hey,
Minneapolis is an interesting place for Magic because you wouldn't think of it as a hotbed for the beginnings of the game in the first few years, but it definitely
was. Yeah.
And was, yes. So, we, like everybody else, we brought our big guns out to play, but what happened was we sold a little bit of that. Like, we sold a foil Rishodon Port, we sold a Guardian Beast, and we sold a Beta Twister, but more often than not, people were looking to shop that stuff around.
Yeah.
We even had somebody from convention hall staff. The dude was in a banana shirt. I've got to say, the Hawaiian shirts at this place were awesome. I saw a guy with a pineapple, a banana, a coconut, and then the dude with the pina colada shirt capped it all off.
Wow.
So this guy came up to us with a banana shirt, and he was talking to one of our guys about what their opinions were on old stock. Should he hold his revised cards and older? And our guy said, well, if you have anything that's worthwhile, like duels or anything, it's up to you because all that stuff is skyrocketed. So if you need the money, get out. If you want, hold it. And the guy responded back with, yeah, I've got my Moxes, and I might just shop them around. And yeah, exactly. You write him off or whatever. And then at end of day, he came in with exactly all of that stuff. So, like, random dude in his mid-30s working at the convention center in a banana button-down.
Nice.
In Minneapolis is, sporting some numbers. But that room filled in, more to the point. There was an MCQ on Friday, an MCQ on Saturday, and I believe an MCQ on Sunday, and I think it was Modern Standard, I want to say. There were Modern Horizons sealed events all weekend long. I saw individuals walking around with 1K boxes, which lead me to believe that they might have done that goofy, like, sealed box format.
Yeah.
But that hall was bumping all weekend. So I believe in more in the idea of the Magic Fest now, and I said this in my tweet leaving. I think we're seeing the Magic Fest as a whole and what it means, and the GP just happens to be an event at the Magic Fest finally. We no longer have to worry about the GP carrying the Magic Fests, though I do believe that player population in the area carries a lot of weight for this. Detroit and DC might not be fests moving forwards if that was the attendance we're going to see. But I believe that we might actually see stronger turnout at Magic Fest as a whole if you look at unique bodies in the room instead of unique bodies at the GP.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
What do you think about that in regards to the GP?
I think, I mean, look, I've long said that, casuals drive the market. So, like, the people that aren't at those Magic Fests, or the people that aren't at the GP, that are just there for the fest side, those are going to be the ones that drive the financial market. I think the problem is that, and I'm going to, for those of you that don't follow the wonderful Eric Froelich on Twitter, he had a brilliant tweet that he sent out. I believe it was last night, actually, or the night before. I love Magic. I've always loved it. I always will. I can't remember the last time playing it was fun. I haven't enjoyed the recent formats. It's hard for me to justify the formats I love because, standard and modern are where I compete, but you can't justify spending time on like Legacy or stuff like that. And I think that what's going to happen is you'll see a lot of the financial aspects that relate to these eternal formats start to decay, or except for EDH, obviously. And I think that standard is more or less, if things continue the way it is and we start to go full on arena, forget paper Magic. I mean, I've said standard's a bad financial vehicle anyways, but like I told you so, standard's garbage. Stay away. It's dead. Like competitive standard will only exist online. It will probably be some garbage tier best of one where like I love Kibler, but Kibler's going to spike it and like, shuffle out of there. Moonwalking his way out the door like nothing ever happened. And especially, the way coverage is going. And I get channel tweets, here's our top 8 profiles, here's our, whatever.
Yep.
But it's not the same because people are used to a certain caliber of coverage. I was talking to somebody else in the industry the other day, and they were like, I can't remember the last time I heard Star City mentioned at a GP that wasn't a GP they were attending. I'm like, yeah, but they're the standard again for coverage.
Yeah.
Because Wizards doesn't have it. And if it goes all arena, because again, it's cheap. It's cheap to broadcast arena. You don't have to pay a logistical staff or anything. That's just all the behind the scenes stuff that you have to do anyways.
Yep.
If they do that, fine. But, I'm kind of with Efro, where he's like, the thing that was more about it to him was this goes pretty heavily against the current direction of competitive play. Arena is an awesome product, but it's not the way I love to play Magic. Shuffling cards, getting to play cool and classic version of the cards I love, and actually interacting with my opponent is what got me into Magic and kept me playing for 25 years. I will say it again. I think through design or mismanagement, paper Magic has 3 to 5 years before it's dead.
Yeah.
So I hate to be all doom and gloom, but I mean I don't really know how long they'll be able to carry this on, especially, and admittedly, I don't think you need an emergency ban of Hogak, but if they continue to muddle or like myth formats the way that they did standard until recently and the way they have modern, I don't know what you're going to do.
Yeah.
Because arena, you can just do it and it's done.
Yeah.
Just roll it out right away. Good.
But the problem is they can't not print paper standard unless they kill the rest of the game in its entirety. You could see arena events, standard events just move to arena only.
Yeah.
Once they actually figure out how to host large person events, and then you don't have to worry about the standard GP anymore. You can just make the Magic Fest the event and start posting modern and legacy GPs again if you just care about the event as a whole, which it seems like that's where they want to be. They want to get people into these halls playing the game in any way, shape, or form. And short of like vintage and old school, every format had a side event this weekend, including Commander. I don't know if there was a Commander fanatic like there were for Constructed, etc., but they definitely fired side events in every single format. And if that becomes the way Magic Fests move going forward, then the lack of coverage for these events definitely has an impact financially. You go back and you look at the way coverage was handled in the text only era, and you would have reports up at the end of the round for what happened in the feature match area, complete with photos, or maybe in the middle of the next round. And those were your finance drivers for what was going on, especially as the event came to a close. And then you would see the cards that did well, maybe something in the top 8 or the top 16 would pop. But we're not even really getting that text coverage at the same speed that we were back in the late 90s and early 2000s before everything moved to video.
Yeah.
So you'll lose that finance driver immediately without these eyes. But they don't need to worry about finance drivers for Modern and Legacy, because those formats are fairly self-sustaining and the products speak for themselves. When you introduce a master set, you don't need additional coverage of that set to help pump prices. The demand for those cards will do it themselves, and everything else contained within that set when they put EDH staples like Monocrypt in there. But what you lose are the drivers for your standard cards. So now you have to rely on Arena, which is also a little bit lacking because there's no full spectator mode, so you can't watch both hands at once when they do these Arena streams. You have to cobble together things like we do here in OBS to do 2 screens on one, and it doesn't turn out to be that great. But it also allows them to host more events, larger events, things with a little more prestige, that pushes product in a sense because they get to make money off the sale of gems.
Yeah. Which has way less overhead for them than printing cards.
Correct. And as of right now, aside from maybe the handful of standard GPs left, there's no real reason to play standard or paper unless you're playing it at F&M. So why bother?
Yeah.
And I think the idea of coverage at a GP waning is fine if they want to continue making them standard GPs. Because Arena happens all the time. 24 hours a day you can find an Arena stream. You don't need coverage of a standard GP to pump prices. But you don't have Modern and Legacy Fire that often, and you want to make things a spectacle, then you put coverage on that 100%. I don't know. I think the idea of the Magic Fest finally came into fruition because it was that point in time where now we might be in the era where WotC's plan is actually going to be able to be enacted, where as before that it felt like Hasbro said, now make money.
Yeah.
Yesterday. So WotC just rolled out their plan in a very ham-fisted fashion and was unprepared to do so 6+ months early. So they weren't able to really locate everything the way they wanted to with Channel. They weren't able to get things set up the way they wanted to. They weren't ready to handle that lack of coverage. And I think in that period of time, Magic Fest just kind of suffered as a whole. They didn't have the feeling that WotC wanted them to have. There was no circus feeling to it like there is now. Back in the day, the feeling when you went to like a large regional or a GP or even a GPT was more that there were people in the room at the vendors and playing side events, and the event just also kind of happened to be there. Eventually that changed a little bit, but
I mean, I remember when Star City first started and they were, the 2-day 5Ks where you had a break today too, and the side events were way better EV. So people showed up and grinded sides there because like,
why not?
Why wouldn't you? Yeah. I mean, looking right now at this very second, we have MTG Goldfish, Jim Davis, and Susurus MTG all streaming Arena.
Mm-hmm.
And they have a combined 1,300 views between those three, which is basically more than Wizards ever got for a GP.
Yeah.
I mean, on granted, some they'd get up to like 18-2, but like...
Oh yeah, when it was just infinite terrible standards and shitty sealed.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think it makes financial sense for them to focus more on Arena. I think that casuals will continue to drive the market. I think there is a certain amount of financial viability to some cards in Legacy. I just think that as competitive Magic, which, again, it looks to me like is maybe dying is a little harsh, but it's definitely changing a lot.
Oh, 100%. The landscape is
and
changing.
yeah, and I think that it's been a long time since we've seen a change like this. And I think the last time that the competitive landscape changed drastically like this was probably when Moto came out. And you had Moto PTQs, and you started to have Star City do a metric ton of coverage. Every weekend there was an event that they were streaming. You could watch it. They had the setup. And I said in one of our earlier episodes where I was like, look, if you want to make Paper Magic good, you want to make it streamable, do something like WSOP did. Take this absurdly boring spectator thing and give people personalities, spice it up.
Mm-hmm.
And they're just getting away from that and going towards the Hearthstone model, which frankly I hate. So, sorry, Blitz.
The Hearthstone model is obnoxious. Like, it's a pain. You lose the personality in it. And it started to show a couple of years ago that those streaming events, at least for a live audience, was not worth it. The one thing, I do agree about the death for competitive standard. I just don't think it is a GPable format anymore. Like, it'll put butts in seats, but if Magic Fests are finally turning into what WotC wants them to be, I don't think standard is a format you can reliably place at these.
I mean,
it
the other
comes
thing
and it
is,
goes, and more often than not, recently it goes because it's just been bad. But even now, with Modern in such a quote unquote dark time, we still had almost 1,000 people sign up for this event right after a Pro Tour. That basically demonstrated that you could play one deck or no decks.
Yep.
That to me that was impressive. I don't know how many people traveled for this event. Obviously, I don't have the stats there. That was WotC might, but I don't think War is that reliable, or Moto accounts are that reliable to figure out.
Yeah, and see that's the thing that to me the travel aspect is what I think you have to base more of the format around. Like, you go to Detroit, you can't fire anything that isn't standard or limited there. You just can't. Socioeconomically, it doesn't exist there. Mm-hmm. You can't fire a legacy Grand Prix in, I don't know, Nevada, or not Nevada, Wisconsin.
Yeah.
I guess you probably could. You got Madison, you got Bach, maybe there. But you can't fire Vintage in St. Louis.
No.
You could definitely fire Vintage in Washington or New York. And granted, you'd probably only get 500 or 600 people, but people travel from across the world for Eternal Weekend.
You want a circus? You make a Vintage Magic Fest. You put a Vintage GP at a Magic Fest in New York City or Seattle or somewhere in California, and you'll have a
Vegas?
Fucking circus.
Yeah, it'll be insane. I mean, they're not going to do it.
No.
But that's, I feel like there's certain areas where they're going to have to run standard GPs, and those are just going to be bad.
Yeah. They're going to have to actually start paying attention to the demographics the way Star City does. Star City used to travel the entire U.S., east to west, and they appeared on the opposite coast as WotC per their agreement. And eventually they started cutting out the West Coast because the cost basis for that was just not good enough. And eventually they started cutting it out. And now what is it? I think is Dallas geographically is the furthest west they go? Or is St. Louis?
Nope, they don't do St. Louis anymore.
Okay.
Dallas.
Yeah, so it's Dallas and Indy, I think, are the furthest west they go. And they know they can put Modern in those places. They can put Modern down in the U.S. Southeast and the U.S. Northeast.
Yeah.
And a lot
people
of other
will
places,
show up in droves.
Yeah, and a lot of other places it's standard just because that's how people turn out. But I don't think WotC's ever really polled the populace to see what happens. And that's why, like I said, I don't think Detroit gets another GP again. DC might not. If they do another one in DC, it shouldn't be in Chantilly, Virginia. I'll put that out there because that area is dog. Nothing on WotC or Channel for this one. That was the venue they chose, and it was great for people who are commuting in. But that area as a whole is dog.
Real bad, yeah.
And I understand putting an event in downtown Washington, D.C. is terrible. I think it's Otakon used to be in Baltimore, and they moved to D.C. a couple of years ago for the first year, and there were a lot of vendors I don't know what I'm going to do, man. Hotels are insane, and the travel costs inside there from the outside is ridiculous to commute, so rough.
So looking at the Star City Open schedule, we've got a Modern in Dallas, a Legacy in Q's, Team Constructed in Philly, Modern in Indy. Regionals are obviously Modern. Atlanta is Modern. SCG Con is going to be everything like always.
Yeah.
Like that's what you're going to have to do is like research those markets, because you can't have Legacy in, I don't know, St. Louis.
Yeah.
Just doesn't happen.
Not a lot of people.
Jeremy gets his people for his 5Ks and his 10Ks, but he only gets a couple hundred people, and that's fine. When you're trying to break like 700-800 people, it doesn't happen here.
Yeah, no, I get that's why it's in Jersey usually, because you can fly international into Newark and deal with that also shit show. I do think that the finance driver of coverage being lost is big for people who wanted to try and make standard their bread and butter without that driver of both the Grand Prix and Star City circuit. You're now relying on one entity, or maybe other smaller entities if there's a local shop by you that streams, and you've got to try and ride it, and I don't think that's going to work out. Come 2020, the MPL times out, I believe. All the pro levels time out after Richmond, and so we have a lot of, I think everything besides F&M is a giant question mark for 2020.
Yeah.
So we're going to find out what happens, because we don't even have an Arena MI set up for 2020 yet.
No, and we don't have our schedule for 2020, and as far as I know, I don't think that they've announced when the announcement is coming, which they love announcing announcements. That's the joke. It's not funny, but that's the joke.
Yeah, I'm not 100%, but because DC and Detroit were so bad, I may not actually have any US GPs next year. I just might be running anime cons.
Yeah.
Because those are just better. But I think the idea of the Magic Fest as a whole is working out when they put it in areas that's a draw.
Yeah.
And that is not a finance driver, but it does mean that there will be worthwhile pieces of information coming out, and if you have the ability to go to these events to floor trade or buy sell with vendors, it's still going to be very worth your while. As a vendor, it means different things. It means that you might have to go wide with your stock. So because Minneapolis was Modern, of course we went deep on Modern, and we brought like the highlights of Standard.
Yeah.
And some powerful stuff for Legacy. Like we didn't have Mox Diamonds or LEDs, and we weren't asked for them, which is fine. But we did bring Force of Will, Brainstorm, stuff like that. Swords, that stuff all sold.
Yeah. And I think that again, casuals will continue to drive the market, but my stance is very much like if coverage goes this way, if attendance for competitive events goes this way, like forget Legacy, just go Modern and EDH. That's where to go besides your stable like RL investments, because the collectability is there, old school viability is there. Those aren't going anywhere. But
no, I can get behind that. And Modern is a little dicey, knowing that they can reprint anything at any time and in a supplemental or even a standard set if they deem the card like low power enough, quote unquote.
Yeah, and I think the thing with Modern is if you're using it for finance, use it to go wide on your stock. Like that's trade stuff, that's super liquid, that's get it at buy list and sell it. It's not exactly like investment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the longest.
Sorry.
It's all right. No. The fact that we're on the same wavelength is more important than the fact that I got to finish the sentence. The one thing I like about Modern though is that the format just exists and it floats along.
Yeah.
And it means that the people that play the format and play their one or two decks are allowed to then sit down and just do what they want with those decks in regards to card art, card type, etc.
Yeah.
So you have a lot of people that just start with mishmash editions and things like that. They'll eventually start foiling things out the more they play the deck and the more they win. And so it does allow for some opportunity for people to pick up some high-end high-end cards on the cheap to then turn around and move. So
foiling out your fetches is great, because then you've got all these fetches that are super liquid and not foil, and you have these super liquid foil fetches.
Yep. I think the only fetches that I haven't seen be super liquid are the judge ones. just because the price tag on those is ridiculous. So it makes them like arguably difficult to sell. And I've never seen anybody play a single Judge fetch at an event.
Never.
It's just like Guru lands. I know Chris Van Meter played 1 or 2 in his amulet list, so it was on stream as somebody having played a Guru land. And there's a Japanese player that always plays Guru lands, even in standard. Yeah.
Yeah.
But outside of those two, man, I've never seen anybody play a single Guru.
I used Summer because weird flex, but okay.
Yeah.
It's you have the option there, and the judge fetches are awful. Like Korean foil cons fetches are more liquid than Judge fetches, which is absurd.
Yeah. I don't know. It's interesting. This is another one of those things where you have to pick your lane because you have to pay attention to what your flag posts and drivers are for these formats. And if you're losing a driver in coverage, what are you going to do to replace that? Where are you going to start getting your margins when people no longer have visibility into what's going on at these events and what's winning?
Yeah.
And it becomes a difficult space to work in. So, but like I said, I think the Magic Fest thing is coming along, and I'm kind of curious to see what their idea is for 2020.
Yeah,
But it just doesn't do anything for finance as a whole, unless they bring coverage back, and I don't even know.
Yeah, at that point, who knows?
GFL, I guess.
I just, it doesn't feel good. I think it sucks, but whatever.
Yeah, I mean, I miss watching Magic all weekend long when I have nothing else to do. So, it is.
It's good background noise.
Oh, absolutely. I have the Star City events, which are also great, but I also like seeing what was going on at the Grand Prix because those are a little more reliable in regards to what cards are going to pick up in terms of price, usually. Release weekend events like the Star City Opens, when WotC takes that weekend off, those are great drivers.
Yeah.
That option still exists. But I think we've pontificated enough. We can move on to picks.
All right. So mine, I'll start it off. For those of you that follow us on Twitter, you saw me tweeting out thinking it was a pretty decent pickup. Last weekend as a bonus pick, I decided to run it back and make it official. Mm-hmm. The foil spellbook version of Martyr's Bond. So a little bit of an odd choice considering how much the value tanked with a single reprint. I'll admit that. But it's a casual all-star. It's an EDH effect. It's the first foil printing. And not that this really matters much, but I've been getting more into collecting Magic art, so I'm going to go with it. It's Seb McKinnon art, and everybody loves Seb right now. He's so hot.
Yep.
And
literally and figuratively.
Yes. And the foils are $2.85 is TCG low for foils. This is the first foil printing. It's unique art. It's a unique frame. Like, it has everything going for it in terms of collectability, and it's just an absurd all-star. Like, right now there are 75 foil listings. I also think, and this is based on conversations with distro, quantities of this spellbook are lower than they were for Jace because Wizards kind of expected them to not sell good.
Yeah,
which they did with Jace for some reason.
Imagine that, all the blue cards.
Yeah. But they, distros still have Jace spellbooks in some cases, but Gideon, they said they got about half the quantity.
Yeah.
So I think that there's a lot more scarcity there, and this is, like, again, just a casual all-star.
Yep. I like it. I finally got to see the frame for these this weekend because we had the paths and the rest of these, right?
Yep.
And some of the cards look good, some of them don't, like with the Jace stuff, and the Martyr's Bond looks pretty decent. So that's also a consideration for something like this, is whether or not it actually looks good in the frame and the foiling.
Yeah.
Do we know the percentage chance of Martyr's Bond foil? Is it 1 in?
So it's
16
1. Yeah, it's 1 in 16. I believe. I don't think it's done by rarity, because, like, there's some in the. I think everything's just rare, or mythic.
I think it's got whatever it's... No, it's all rare. 1, 2, 3.
Yeah, it's all rare. So it's
Gideon's
1 in
mythic.
14.
Sorry.
Oh, yeah. Well, that card's worthless now anyways. Rip.
I guess 1 in... There's 8 cards, so I guess 1 in 8.
Yeah, 1 in 8. And I mean, even looking at the foil prices on this right now, like Worship, I guess Shielded by Faith is cheaper, Gideon is cheaper, and True Conviction is cheaper. 2 of those are super EDH playable in Martyr's Bond and Gideon, so I think they're a decent pickup.
Yep, no, I think so too. And my pickup this week is also an EDH card. I slept on it a little bit. I changed my pick a couple months ago from this card to Chancellor of the Tangle, and then had some conversations with people who have bought heavily into the market for this. And my card is Woodfall Primus.
Yeah.
So the card is great. It's a $10 or was a $10 EDH staple until the UMA printing, which is the third printing. You have Shadowmoor, Modern Masters, and Ultimate Masters. And this card can be found kind of for cents on the dollar because, like I said, it's crashing. It's on its way down. It's like $2.50,
$2-3, something like
the Modern
that.
Masters version. And unless they print this again in another Masters set, which is always a possibility, eventually this card's going to course correct. Right now we're seeing a huge separation in average and market, which just generally means that demand isn't there. So these prices are going to keep coming down. So I don't know if I would move in on it yet. Like, the only copies I own are the copies I play, so maybe 2 or 3. I play set at most just in case I want to play a lot of green EDH. But I think this is a card that if, like, this complete landslide of a price graph is to be believed, that we will eventually see this card dip down to be sub $1 soon, or maybe close to $1, and then that's when I would buy in. We might see it around the holidays when people get their holiday money and they want to start buying into cards they couldn't pick up, more expensive options or better options for what they own. So we could just see it kind of plateau out for a little while until the holidays, and if it does, I'd probably give it about a month. So maybe of like pure plateau. So if you don't want to keep checking in every couple of weeks, set an alarm, check for mid-October, and if we've seen a plateau until then that's when I would move in on this card. Because, again, without another printing, there's no way this trough just doesn't reverse and climb back up towards $10 again, because this is a green EDH staple, whether you're mono or even if you're splashing. 3 green is not that hard to get off of signets and your off-color lands. And the effect, while replaceable, is not on a 6/6 trampling body.
That persists.
Yeah, exactly. So
self-reanimation, who knew?
Exactly, right?
It's good.
I mean, and it's an ETB trigger, it's not a cast, for what it's worth, so you can cheat it in any way you want.
Yep.
Yeah, has that going for it. But that's the card I'm looking at for this week.
I think that's a solid choice. When we discussed it, when you changed to Chancellor, I thought it was solid then too, and it was higher in price. So I definitely think as this gets lower and lower, like you said, the delta between low and market is almost $1.50 right now. On the Shadowmoor. So that's pretty decent. So I think it's solid.
Thank you. Well, I think that's all we got for this week, guys. So we're gonna cut out of here.
Feel free to catch us at Vegas. Next week. We'll
both be there. We were trying to figure out timetables.
Yeah.
So once we figure that out, we'll let everybody know. But I am at Halt. I am Reptar.
I am at Thirsty Sizzler.
We are at MtG Cabalcast on Twitter and on Patreon. You can find us not only in those locations, but also in our Discord. If you become a patron, that also enters you into our UMA raffle. And the next one we will have coming up most likely post Vegas and pre Eldraine, once we figure out what we want to give away.
Yep.
So stay tuned, guys.
Likely going to be a set of the Commander decks. So stay tuned.
All right. See you guys next week.
Yep. See ya.